Subordinating conjunctions. So we can use an acronym, like with coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, to remember these. I like to use a white bus, which stands for although, after, as, when, if, that, even though, because, until, unless, since. But they are not all of the subordinating conjunctions. There are so many of them that it's really hard to get them into an acronym. But you know what? Actually knowing a list of them isn't going to help you. The best way to understand what a subordinating conjunction is to understand how it functions. And all subordinate clauses, when started with a subordinating conjunction, will always be adverbials as well. So if you haven't watched the adverbial video, I recommend you go and watch that first to understand what an adverbial is before we move on here. So how do subordinating conjunctions work to create a subordinate clause, and how are they linked to adverbials? Let's look at an example. We will go to the beach. Under what condition will we go to the beach? If it is sunny. Here we've answered under what condition will we go to the beach by adding on an extra clause. Remember, our clause has a subject and a verb. So let's look at if it is sunny. In this structure, is the verb and the subject is it. Sunny is telling us more about it, so here it's an adjective. And this is our full structure with a subject verb, therefore we have an extra clause. And what have we put on the front of that clause to answer under what condition? We've put if. And if is a subordinating conjunction. Why? Because it's created an extra clause, if it is sunny, which doesn't make sense by itself. It's subordinate to the main clause, we will go to the beach, or we would say it's dependent on the main clause, we will go to the beach. Why is it dependent or subordinate to it? Because without we will go to the beach, you are just saying if it is sunny. And that doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Number one, because of the if word. And number two, the whole existence of that clause happened because we answered the question, under what condition will we go to the beach? And that's what subordinate clauses do, and that's why we need subordinating conjunctions, to be able to create the answers to those questions. So let's ask a few more questions. We will go to the beach when Mum arrives. Here we've got the clause Mum arrives, and we've added on when on top. What question are we answering about that main clause? When will we go to the beach? When Mum arrives. So that extra clause is subordinate, dependent on the main clause. Why? Because without it, it doesn't make sense by itself. Its entire existence is down to the fact that you are answering, when will we go to the beach? If you do not understand what an adverbial is, you will never be able to understand what a subordinate clause is and what a subordinating conjunction is. So this learning needs to come together in order to get a full understanding of how this works. On top of that, we then punctuate subordinate clauses when they move to the front of structures. For example, when Mum arrives, we will go to the beach. Here, because we've moved that modifying adverbial clause to the front, we're going to put a comma after it because it doesn't belong there. The main subject verb is we will go. And so to show it's separate and not to confuse the first part as the main structure, we're going to put a comma to say this is separate, it can be removed, it can be moved. That's the whole point of the comma, to mark the boundaries between these two clauses, especially when it's at the front and it's disrupting the idea of the subject and verb in the main clause. One more example. I removed my jumper because I was hot. Here we've got the main clause. I removed my jumper. The verb is removed. Who removed what removed? I. So I is the subject. What did you remove? The jumper. Therefore, that is the main clause of that subject-verb-object structure. Then what question do we answer about the verb in order to create the subordinate clause? Because I was hot. We say, why did you remove your jumper? Because I was hot. And so that, because I was hot, is an answer to the main clause. And therefore it's dependent on the question in order to exist. That's why it's dependent. That's why it's subordinate. And the word because is the subordinating conjunction, at the head of it, and then that clause we can also pick it up and move it to the front, because that's what we can do with adverbials, remember, because subordinate clause are adverbials. And we say, because I was hot, comma, I removed my jumper. The comma marks the boundary of the clauses, and the comma here is both for a fronted adverbial and for a subordinate clause, because they can be exactly the same thing. Go and watch the video on adverbials to see how adverbials can also be single words and phrases, and not clauses like we've just discussed here.